We've come to that place in the service where various parts of Almond's life, and there were so many, he wore so many hats. We get to celebrate them and receive remarks from members of his family and from members of the community. Chief Stacy Cotton of the Covington Police Department will begin our remarks. He will be followed by the grandchildren of Deacon Almond Turner. Representing the Newton County School System, Samantha Fury, the Superintendent of Schools. They will all be followed by the eldest child of our dearly departed, Pastor Dwan Turner, who will conclude our remarks in this service. You are welcome to come to the pulpit, or you're welcome to stand at the microphone that's been provided. Chief Cotton will begin our remarks.
We're not supposed to be here today. We're supposed to be at work or at home talking about all the turkey, all the leftovers, all the great football we saw. Yes, Georgia did throttle Georgia Tech. And I apologize to the captain from Georgia Tech that I saw walk through a little while ago. But I had to get in one for the dogs. But we're not supposed to be here today. The last 10 days seems like nothing but a bad dream. But yet I'm heartened and warmed by the many familiar faces of this family that's standing here today. And I want to say a special thank you to Dr. Lee and his staff for opening their doors to Almond's home and making the rest of us feel like family and welcome. You put on such a professional organization, and Reverend Mitchell's been a person that I could lean on, and I just want to say thank you to allowing us to be into this house today. Almond would be just blown away by all this, by all the support this community has given, all the outpouring. He would tell me, he'd say, why me? Why are they doing that? And I'd say, because they loved you, Almond. Every one of us. Even the ones that aren't here today, that came by last night, and all the well-wishers that couldn't be here today, there's a lot of love for Almond Turner. I saw all the blue lights last night as we was taking him back to the funeral home after the visitation. And I could see it was almost a mile of nothing but blue lights. And I know Almond would be just tickled to death about that because he loved police work. 45 years. 45 years. And even though he worked in the business, Almond also loved TV shows, just like many of you do. You know all you like to watch that. Live PD, Cops, First 48, or even NCIS, or whatever your preference. But think about it, law enforcement is the most covered subject on TV, whether directly or indirectly. So I guess, or I'm hoping, that you might be a little interested in how a typical conversation between a police chief and his assistant chief would go. You're probably thinking, wow, he's getting ready to tell us some high-level stuff, something having to do with budget issues, hiring, criminal activity, or some other crisis. I mean, you think about these two positions that give the Covington Police Department its direction, its marching orders. The buck stops with Stacy Cotton and Almond Turner. But this is a typical conversation that you may hear on a Friday afternoon. Almond comes in and he sits down in my office, and maybe he tells me something of not much significance. Maybe it's about a case we inquired about that was completed, or he rehashed something that happened earlier in the week. This conversation only lasts for a couple of minutes, and then it gets really serious. Almond asked me, what are you doing this weekend? And after I'd tell him what I was going to do, he'd say, well, doctor, you see, I don't know if you know, I'm not a doctor. But truth be known, he referred to many of you as a doctor. You see, if you knew Almond and Almond liked you, he'd give you a PhD. But then Almond would say, when I leave here, I'm going home getting neat. We're going to go get something to eat. And he'd say, I have my mouth set for some catfish. I never could understand what he meant by, I got my mouth set. But he would say it with a joyful pride that that catfish was about to be the most important thing he was going to have that evening. And all the while, he'd have that big smile on his face, and you know that big smile. And he would continue on in great detail how that meal that night was going to be a great one. Almond loved many things: his Lord, his family, his job, his church, his music. But if you really know Almond, he loved food. More often than not, he would come in the mornings and tell me that about how the night before, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, he woke up and he was hungry. And he would say, Neat had made some supper earlier in the evening. Maybe it was pork chops, collard greens, casserole, several other things. And he would have this big grin telling me how he heated it up, this whopping plate of leftovers, and how great it tasted at 2 a.m. And all I could do was shake my head. I said, how do you eat like that, Almond? How do you eat like that in the middle of the night? And he said, easy, doctor, just heat it up. He said, I was hungry, I had to eat. And again, I just shook my head and I say, how do you go back to sleep with all that laying on your stomach? He said, like a baby. Like I said, we had some high-level conversations. That man loved to eat so much, he would ride all the way to Panola Road just to get some Popeye's fried chicken. Imagine how happy he was when they opened one in Conyers, much less Covington. Of course, and you know this one, of course, he believed that his rib sauce was the best ever made. And he threatened many times he was going to open up a rib shack. And I think I convinced him not to when I said, Almond, it'd be so popular that you couldn't keep up. And Need ain't about to go come work at a hot rib shack on Highway 278. If you'll allow me the opportunity, I want to tell you some things about Almond Turner that most of you already probably know in your own experiences of what I'm going to say. Many of you have some of the same fond memories as I do, because Almond was the same no matter who he was talking to. I just want to share with you, if you will, Almond Turner from my perspective. In no particular order, because they are all important to me. I want to share with you my perspective of his love of the Lord, his love of his family, and his impact on me. First, it is no secret that Almond loved the Lord. Why not? The Lord had blessed him in so many ways. The Lord blessed Almond with the gift of music. He never ceased to amaze me, his many talents with so many instruments. He truly loved music, and you could tell he had the touch of an angel with not only instruments but his voice. The Lord also blessed him with a loving mother who raised him during tough times. I believe it was her influence that shaped Almond the most. There was never a time that I met with Miss Levancy Turner that she didn't have a smile on her face. She taught Almond how to love. He was also blessed with a loving little brother that he cared for deeply. So deeply that he raised Mike when their father died at such a young age. Taking early responsibility to set an example, he knew Mike was watching and learning. And then finally, of course, the Lord brought Anita into his life. Or as we love and refer to her, and Almond always did, as Neat. And then, of course, the kids, Dewan, Shay, Chandra, but more on that later. Almond believed in the Lord deeply, and he did so as most disciples should. That is, serve with a servant's heart. Serving God by serving others. And he had a teacher's heart, and that's probably why he joined the school board, because he knew how important education had been in his life. I can't tell you how many times he and I, and sometimes others, would talk about our belief in God and our salvation. Those times of theology allowed us to question our religion from a healthy perspective, and at the same time grow and become stronger in our faith. Learning how others believed and debating the meanings of Scripture from different Christian denominations gave us all a better understanding of how we serve the Lord. Almond didn't thump a Bible in his face. He just lived his life and let us watch. Almond was a good Christian surgeon, but that didn't mean he didn't have a sense of humor. And if you weren't careful, he'd get you. First story I want to tell you about, he loved to find the gullible police officers in the station, and he'd pick on them. And I got one sitting out here right now that's a captain. This captain was proud. He had built his first house, and he was moved into it, and he was all excited. Moving day was coming, and Almond told him, said, "Hey, when you get into that house," he said, "did you get your mailbox?" Officer said, "What do you mean, my mailbox?" He's like, "Yeah." He said, "Every person gets their very first house. You go down to the post office, and you tell them you got your first house. He said, they'll give you your first mailbox." That officer said, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." So he marched on down to the post office. Can you possibly imagine the look on that postmaster's face when this crazy Covington police officer is standing there going, "I'm here to get my first mailbox"? Gets better. There's a DEA agent somewhere out on the West Coast that one time Almond convinced that there were rules on how big cities could be around the world. That you could only build, that the city of Atlanta could only be a certain size, New York could only be a certain size, Shanghai could only be a certain size. Because if you overbuilt a city in one section of the earth, it would get the earth to wobble. And it would make it unbalanced. And these people are protecting us, but as I mentioned earlier, Almond's family was his blessing, and he knew it. First, there are his children. I've known Almond for almost 33 years, and I've watched each of you grow up from children to be the strong adults that you are. He was so proud of what each of you have accomplished in life, but he was most proud of the strong people of character that you have become. In this day and time, for all three of your children who are strong individuals and a close-knit family, that's a rarity. It speaks to Anita and Almond's compassion. To all of us that know Almond and Neat, we're not surprised by that. But the greatest gift y'all gave him were all those grandchildren. And was he proud of those grandchildren? Seemed like every time we got together, he was showing me pictures and telling me how grown they were getting. About 2 weeks ago, I got to show him a picture of my first grandson. And I told him how I now understood a grandfather's love that he shared with me for so many years. And he was genuinely happy for me. I got to stop for a second and tell you, I forgot to tell you at the very beginning of this thing, I'm known as the crying police chief. And he's known as the crying assistant police chief. And he always said, "Doctor, it's because we care." And he's right. So if I get a little choked up through this, just understand it's my love. Neat, what can I say? I have the honor and privilege to know you almost as long as I've known Almond. We have traveled many places together. And like my wife, you know the burden we as leaders of the police department have to bear. You've always been a huge supporter of the Covington Police Department and me. You even helped raise my boys, and I'll always be indebted for you for your kindness and generosity towards me and my family. Almond never let a day go by that he didn't speak of you. Over time, I watched him live the saying, "Honor thy wife." I watched a man love his wife in a way that many other men, including myself, should strive to do. And all those times together, we had a lot of fun. We had fun everywhere. There was one time Almond and I were in Schaumburg, Illinois for a CALEA conference, and we had Cheryl and several other staff members with us to get an accreditation award. We decided during our off time we were going to go see the Clumps. You remember that Eddie Murphy movie, The Clumps? And I'm just going to say it was the scene where they're all sitting around the kitchen table. Yeah, that's right. I can't go any further than that. But remember now, it's the first time Almond and I had seen it. And y'all know Almond's laugh. I mean, when he laughed, he'd laugh from deep in the belly. Needless to say, me and him started laughing. We were sitting beside each other. We got so cracked up. We were crying. And we were laughing. And then we got to laughing at each other. And the movie was continuing on, but we just could not stop. Before you know it, other people in the movie theater were laughing along with us. But apparently it got so bad that some child about 2 rows up said, "Mommy, Mommy." And she said, "What, baby?" She said, "I'm scared." We would do things like that all the time. But, Almond had a way of laughing. If he had that deep belly laugh, he'd get tickled. He'd wipe his eyes, and he'd get confused sometimes. He'd tell you, he's like, "Hey, you remember so-and-so?" And I'd be like, "Who, Almond?" He's like, "What's a thingamajig? What you call it?" And I'd be like, "Almond, who you talking about?" He said, "Thingamajig. Look, stay down there on so-and-so street. He's so-and-so's cousin, third uncle." And I'm sitting there. And finally, when it finally comes to him, he's bringing up somebody he knew back in 1963, before I was even born. But we had a great time. And she'd laugh right along with us, and we'd get literally, we'd get carried away. And she'd look at us, she'd go, "Almond, I ain't playing now." That was our cue to calm back down, bring it back there. But let me tell you about his gift to me. I first met Almond Turner the summer of 1982, prior to my senior year at Newton County High School. We met at the Newton County Rams Lift-a-thon, where we would raise money lifting weights against the police department. I remember this really friendly guy who put us all at ease. Now fast forward to 1986, and he was on the interview panel that hired me to work at the police department. He even drove me to GBI headquarters to take my polygraph test to be hired. When I began my career in January of 1987, I remember Captain Almond Turner as a person who was easy to talk to and was quick with a joke or a laugh. As I rose up through the ranks, there were people who influenced me to be the leader that I am today and the person I am today. Of course, I owe a lot to my parents, but others such as Captain Willie Davis, Lieutenant Rick Miller, and of course Steve Horton, who supervised me along the way and appointed me to Assistant Chief in June of 1997. And then there was Almond. You see, the week I was appointed was a great week for me, but not necessarily for the people who were passed over in the promotion. For several days, and probably for a couple of weeks, there were people who wouldn't even speak to me unless they absolutely had to. But not Almond. I will never forget, about 2 days after I was appointed, Almond and I had to go somewhere, and we got back to the station. Before we could get out of the car, Almond said, "Hey, I know some people aren't happy right now. Even I wanted to be promoted too, and my feelings are hurt. But it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You didn't promote yourself, and I'm with you. And if there's ever anything you need, just ask. I got your back, doctor." And that would be the theme of our friendship from that point on. Just 6 months later, in December of 1997, I was appointed police chief, and my first action was to promote or to appoint an assistant police chief. I had to have somebody that would have my back, and there was only one choice. I had the honor of promoting Almond Turner as my assistant chief on Christmas Eve, 1997, my first official act. Almond's promotion to assistant chief made him, at the time, the highest ranking African American in the history of the city of Covington. I heard it said that Almond fought for many things over his life. I was with him for 34 of those years, and I never saw him fight for anything. I did see him struggle. Every person struggles. Struggling is natural. If it wasn't for struggling, there'd be no need for heaven. Struggling and overcoming is what defines character. Almond took his struggles and overcame them. He learned from them, and he turned those struggles to wisdom. Wisdom that he would share with all of us. Almond always saw the good in everyone, in every situation. He not only saw the glass as half full, he understood that what he had drunk from the glass nourished him, and that the rest of the glass was waiting to give him even more nourishment. So cherish it. Don't despise it. Don't criticize it. I saw Almond's strength and character in his bold determination, along with that positive attitude that he would be the best he could be the best husband, father, co-worker, police officer, friend, church member, or whatever walk of life you knew him as, he would excel. He didn't say, hey, look at me. He just lived his life and let us watch. That's not fighting. That is being the best you can be with the strength of character, so much so that others take note. I took note and chose him to help me lead the Covington Police Department. I knew that with my knowledge of patrol tactics and his administrative skills and his investigative skills, along with his natural ability to talk to the community, that together we would be a great team. What I lacked, he would greatly make up for. And over the years, I believe I chose wisely. For over 20 years, we led side by side one of the finest police departments in the country. I could not have done it without my friend and partner. He would always say, no matter how serious things got around the city or how dire the situation was, he would always reassure me, I got your back, doctor. To the average person sitting out here today, I stand before you a typical, balding, gray-haired, overweight police chief. Like many of you seen on TV shows or in the news, and I am, I know that. But what you may not realize is my generation in comparison to Almond's generation. You see, Almond's a baby boomer. Me, I'm a Generation Xer. I was born in 1965. Now think about that for a minute. I was born after President Kennedy had been assassinated. And I was only 3 years old when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. What does that mean? It means that I started first grade in 1971, and what I understand was only the second year of integration in Newton County. At the time, I didn't know it. We were only 6 years old, and we were too busy trying to learn our ABCs and make new friends. It also means that all I know about the civil rights movement, I learned in the social studies in the mid to late 70s. Not Almond. No, Almond lived it. He lived through the tough times of marches, of segregation, of him as a boy, as a little boy having to go around to the side of the Tasty Freeze on Washington Street because the front window was for whites only. Yeah, he told me about that. To this day, I still can't wrap my mind around how people were treated then just because of the color of their skin. He told me of how hard it was for him to understand why he couldn't go up to where his white friends could go just to get an ice cream. And yet, despite this and many other mistreatments, Almond Turner kept his great attitude. He kept his head up and his determination that his star would shine so bright that others would take notice. He kept working on that and polishing that character that Levancy Turner herself forged from her steel. Dr. King said, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Almond had that dream also. The day I named him assistant chief, it was because of the content of his character. Almond Turner and I had such many great talks that we were living through the times of change and that he was passing the torch of what he had to live through so that I may know his struggles firsthand, so that I would always remember his stories of those times, so that when I saw wrong against all people, I would know it, recognize it, and make sure it didn't fall, and that I didn't fall for false prophets who try to disguise it as something it's not. I know that Almond's life was destined for something special. As I was composing this speech, I thought of how I've always thought I might have to say goodbye to Almond. I thought it would be when he was well into his 90s, like his mother. I, like you, never thought it would be this soon. And then it dawned on me that if Almond had lived at the ripe old age, then his message wouldn't be as clear to us. You see, what each of you already know about Almond, what has already been said, those things yet to be said, and all those lives he has touched, his leaving us now has snapped us to a level of attention that might otherwise pass us by. In his almost 70 years, Almond has made a profound impact on so many lives. We are a better community because of Almond Turner. I want to try to prove that with one last point. Now, over the last few days, the news has been great to us about bringing Almond's story over, letting us know, letting everybody know about his passing and how much we love and cherish him. But stop and think about this. The news is only 30 minutes to an hour, and most stories only take a few seconds at a time or a brief minute. I believe the reason why is that bad news is easy. It's fast. You can cram a lot of bad in a little space. Why is it so hard to report good news? Well, just look around. You can't put all this good in this community in a small place. You can't tell the story of Almond Turner in one service. You can't take the hundreds, if not thousands, of good stories, good times, good deeds, and condense them into a small container. No, sir. The good in this community, in this world that Almond Turner touched is because he believed he was a servant of Jesus Christ and cannot and will not be contained. So I challenge you to go out here today, and let's pick ourselves up as Almond would do and find the good in our community, our friends, and our family. Let's put down the Facebook, the Twitter, and whatever else that only lets us share bad and criticize others, and let's do good like Almond would do. All of the good Almond did in your life, he never did it with Facebook, Twitter, or whatever. He did it with that infectious smile and that warm laugh. If you'll let me close by just saying this to my friend, Almond. Goodbye, my dear friend. You have lived a good life. You have fought the good fight, and now you will be with the Lord and enjoy your blessings. Oh, and about these things here on earth, but do not worry yourself with what's going on here. You know it's a great community because you helped make it great, in your church, and they will continue to disciple to others as you disciple. And your family will continue to be a model family because you taught them to be that way. Seriously, Almond, don't worry. I have your back, Doc.